listening to Shop Talk with your host, Kevin Tetz. Brought to you by Eastwood Tools. Everything you need to do the job right.
Hey Gearheads, we're back from SEMA and happy to have participated in the biggest and best SEMA ever. This year was the largest attendance ever recorded, which is good news for the automotive aftermarket and great news for us, since we were able to get some interviews with some very interesting folks, and sometimes people that you'd have to travel halfway around the world to get a chance to meet, let alone a chance to chat with. So buckle up, because there are several of those SEMA chats on the way. This one is with a premier builder and customizer, JF Launier, from my hometown in British Columbia, Canada. It's a big planet, but it's a small world, and JF has some interesting things to share. Check it out. You're listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tetz, and we are from the floor at SEMA Show 2013 live. And guess who we literally ran into in the hallway? We've got JF Launier from my hometown, Osoyoos, well, actually Oliver, in British Columbia, Canada. JF, how are you, man?
I'm awesome. How you doing, Kevin?
Good. Well, it's nice to see you, man. We've been talking and emailing for... well, it's been years, actually, and you've been almost a guest on the truck show, and we've been talking about a phone interview, so it's nice to finally hook up with you.
Well, good. Yeah, thanks.
Well, what have you brought to the show? What do you got here?
This year is the first year in 10 years we have nothing.
Wow.
So I am just a spectator. I'm stealing other people's ideas, looking for color options. The reason we have nothing is because we're working full-time. I could only take 3 days away from our big Ridler project. As you know, we've been to the Grade 8 twice.
Yes, and congratulations on that, man. That's awesome.
I do think that's a big achievement, and it's a lot of work. So knowing what we had to do to get there in the past, I had to sort of put this whole shop on lockdown and make sure that our project for this year, 2014, coming up, isn't going to miss a beat. We want to show up, and we want to have a car that has a chance of winning.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen your work up close and in magazines, and if anybody's got a chance, it's you, pal, for real.
Yeah, we're kind of hoping it's our turn.
Yeah.
Hopefully the honeymoon's over.
Yeah,
and we can finally seal the deal.
Cool.
But as you know, I mean, it's a very subjective industry.
Yeah.
The car show world is different than any of the autocross stuff that you and I are both familiar with. There isn't a stopwatch to measure the difference between cars. It's humans, and it's people that have an idea and have to sort of interpret the work that you've done and give an award away that is probably the most desired award in the industry.
Absolutely.
And it's all that weight falls on their shoulders. They do a great job of it.
Yeah. And on that note, JF, it's such stiff competition, and at the top of the heap, absolutely. But you and I both know all the cats that are in those circles, all these guys that compete on that high level. I'm hard-pressed to find somebody that I can't call a very nice human being. Everybody is cooperative, it seems like, and there's just a general spirit of people kind of on the same page. Do you find that as well?
You're absolutely right. It is a gentleman's sport. It seems that, I think one of my mentors and good friends, Chip Foose, said it best when he said, JF, if you and I were good friends when we were growing up, and we rode BMXs together, and we wanted to go to a different town to win a BMX event, we would both teach each other our tricks, raise each other to a better bar, and then nobody could touch us.
Yeah.
Well, I do find that in this industry, the people that are at the top, they seem to be able to make room for other guys willing to work hard, and they're willing to sort of reach out their hand and give you a little tug once in a while, and it's invaluable. You cannot make it there without your mentors and without paying attention to what other people have done, ideas in styling, ideas in drive lines, and just in general, how does a car get built, and how do you build a car that's better than what's been built before?
Yeah, and you've got to think out of the box, and you've got to take from other people's influence, and like you said, it raises the bar, and it raises the bar for everybody. It sets higher standards, and I think it's awesome that there's that type of cooperative competition, if you can even call it that, in place.
Yeah, absolutely it is cooperative. I don't ever feel like I'm going to have to beat somebody, or I just don't feel that way. And maybe that happens as you get older and as you have some accomplishments. I do find a lot of times there's younger builders that have a whole bunch of questions that just appear to be, well, how do I get there, and what have I got to do, and who have I got to be in front of? And at the end of the day, I think if you just build a quality car and you're personable, the rest of it actually comes to you. Yeah,
well, one of my favorite quotes is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that just applies. It fits perfectly. But let me ask you this. When I was trying to be a rock star, and of course, by the way, I starved to death trying, being from Canada, and those of you guys listening, JF and I we're 12 miles apart. We used to have a rivalry between the Oliver High School and the Osoyoos High School.
Absolutely.
JF is from Osoyoos, British Columbia, down in the south central Okanagan Valley, and it's beautiful up there. Very kind to old cars, too, isn't it? So anyway, as a Canadian trying to make it in the U.S. market, it's really tough. Because you got to make it in Canada, then you got to start all over again and make it in the United States. So people very wise told me, look, go where the industry is. My question to you is this. Being from Canada, I kind of see a little bit of a parallel there. Was it difficult for you to transition out of that company or country and become visible down here in the States?
It's funny, Kevin, because I don't still believe that I'm not visible down here. Everybody's got a different angle on their level of success or what they actually think they need to achieve to, in their own heads, be successful. I will say this, though. I will say I'm demographically challenged. I think I have the hardest uphill battle of any of the builders, being that I'm in the wrong country. And by saying that, I don't mean that the country itself is wrong.
Yeah.
But we don't have as many gearheads as up there as we do here.
Well,
it does
just
involve
not
a lot
as
of
many
traveling.
people either.
There just isn't.
Yeah.
Our whole country has 30 million people roughly, and the state of California has that many people.
Yeah.
So if we can feature that already, we're 1/10 the population.
Yeah.
It makes parts sourcing very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, our country gets a lot of snow, and so it makes antique parts sourcing. So if you got to find something old, you're going to have to go find it elsewhere, and usually import it from the U.S. I do live in a very small town in Canada, so I don't even have the luxuries of having a chrome plating shop in the same town, or powder coating. Some of the simplest stuff. When I bring in some friends from out of town, they're like, well, where's the hardware store, or where can I get some fasteners? And it's like, well, we're going to have a 2-day plan to get the fasteners here.
Yeah, but let me pose this to you. I grew up in the same area. My Uncle Herb had A&H's Auto Parts in Oliver. My cousins and my brother and I, we'd grow up dirt poor. We don't have nothing. If we want it, we got to build it.
Yep.
So it created not only a drive in us, but also the ability to think through problems and solve them inexpensively. So would you say that has served you building high-end custom cars?
I think you're right. It served me in actually building the cars, and I think the uniqueness of that sort of, that when you have the drive and you're going to do it regardless of where you're at or how much money you have or what your particular situation is. The other thing it's created in a weird way is that I have my own flair and my own style.
Yeah.
A lot of my customers and a lot of my peers just a lot of times find that they're surprised by some of the ideas I come up with, but maybe that's because I'm not in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And I never intended to own a 32 Ford.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else that grows up as a car kid needs a 69 Camaro and a 32 Ford, and you get taught what a car is supposed to look like, rather than trying to invent what you think a car may have the ability to look like, if you will.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, and you said a while ago, and I want to correct you, that you don't feel like you're very well exposed here. I've seen you on multiple TV shows. Your cars are featured in many magazines. People know your name, pal, so congratulations for that. You've broken through the barrier, and whether it seems like it or not, you're very well respected. So not
Thanks
to
so much,
create
Kevin.
a circular smoke-blowing competition here, but I want to say it out loud, because it's what I see as the truth. But,
Perfect.
So you coming up as a rod builder, I know you've mentioned Chip Foose, and I'm proud to say that I know Chip as well.
Yep.
We're not as tight as you guys, but it's nice to be able to shake his hand when he slows down long enough. So mentors to us are really, really important. What would you say to somebody coming up that's frustrated, trying to get into the industry, trying to develop their skill set? How do you go about meeting people? If, for instance, what's your best advice for somebody coming up that wants to learn, that's hungry for knowledge?
I'd say don't quit your day job, for one.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem with a lot of guys is they'll build a pretty nice car, and then they'll quit their day job and try to run a hot rod shop. You don't need to run a hot rod shop to get noticed in the industry.
Yeah.
Charlie Hutton, an amazing painter, probably one of the best.
Yes.
Well, he didn't start his till he was in his 40s.
Yeah.
He didn't need to. What he did is he made the effort to realize that in any industry or in any skill set, you have to be an apprentice. So just because you built a really cool car, maybe you should think about working for the best hot rod shop around.
Yeah.
A lot of guys came out of Boyd Coddington's shop with a lot of skill sets and with a lot of experience working on very high-end stuff. So to just say, okay, well, I'm going to open up a shop in the backyard and I'm going to pump out some stuff and try to get noticed, you got way more chance of getting noticed and way more chance of getting some notoriety by doing the apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
Just get on with somebody that has some skills.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hide that from you.
No.
And maybe after a few years of working with a guy that's got some talent,
Yeah.
you can take more experience that you've gained rather than cutting a bunch of panels off yourself, screwing them on or welding them on and realizing that, wow, I've made some mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
Having a mentor and having somebody you can work with some experience is the best way, I think. I did some of that myself, and of course I had, as you know, not a lot of places to choose from to work where we're from, and had to reinvent some of it for myself. But I do think that go out, learn with somebody that can teach you shoulder to shoulder rather than just setting up a shop in the backyard and thinking you're going to reinvent the industry.
Yeah. Well, I also had the experience while I was doing the music industry. When the band would break up or we had a hiatus, everybody else would go home and borrow money from their parents. And because I had some hand skills, I would get a job in body shops. And I worked at the shop in California, in Venice. It was called Alejandra Porsche. High-end European automobiles, exclusive shop. So I got a job there for, I'm not even going to say how many dollars an hour, not enough, but ramen noodle soup was $5 for a buck at Ralph's at the time. So, we were starving musicians, so I didn't need to make that much money. My point is, I worked for those guys. They didn't treat me like crap, but they put me in my place in the sense that the first tool that I picked up in that shop was a push broom. Over time, when I proved myself, I got to learn how to block. I watched a man shrink metal that I've never seen anybody better. I got to learn how to color sand and buff. And those formative years for me taught me so much. I was getting paid nothing. So, guys listening, I want to remind you that you're not going to pop out of the automotive womb and be making $100K a year. It ain't going to happen. You got to earn it. You got to pay your dues. Would you say that's true, JF?
I think that's 100% well said. And I think without those formative years, without that, everybody that buys a 60s Camaro and bolts a set of wheels on and puts a cool color on it in their home small town, it's the coolest. They're the coolest cat around. They're cruising the strip, and everybody thinks they're ready to be Chip Foose. You're not there yet. And if you can appreciate that, and if you can just sort of take a step back and realize that you got to put a plan together, learning from mentors, and whether you can mentor yourself, buy the videos. Get the books. But you have to do that before you're going to make it through. So if the guys are asking, how do I get through? I really think you just earn it. And like you said, to just go and learn it from somebody else, because it's hard to reinvent. And I think a lot of the skill sets can't be taught in school. I know the body trade these days it's a panel replacement trade. And really, it is about fixing plastic panels. If you're going to get in the auto restoration industry or the hot rod industry and make a big splash, you're going to have to know how to work real metal.
Absolutely. And today's metal on your import cars, it's not the same, man. And there's a reason those panels are so easily replaceable. But.
And I think I could say something to that too. And that this last car that we've been doing, it's funny how I've put down a lot of the power tools and how often I pick up a hand file. And I would say that 10 years ago I didn't do as much of that. And now I just find myself wanting to use my hands, wanting to use simple tools again. And I do believe that's how you do your best work. But you have to teach yourself those skills.
We're listening to Shop Talk, and we're talking with JF Launier from JF Kustoms in Osoyoos, BC, and it's a pleasure to have you here, man. Got a question about welding. Let's talk about welding.
Sure.
You TIG weld and MIG weld, yes?
Yes, I think we all have to learn those skills.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Brad Starks Kustoms in Kentucky, fantastic craftsman. I was talking to him and angsting that my TIG skills aren't what they need to be. And he said, listen, do it. Do the work. It raises your whole skill set because the tolerances have to be less. So that's what I'm working on as a technician. How important is that, would you say, for a home hobby guy and a DIY guy?
Oh, I don't know that that's going to change your life. And I'm very opinionated as to the big the TIG welding and the MIG welding battle that seems to happen. I'm very opinionated on that because my very first, when I came into the industry, I had a different eyeball than everybody else, and I wanted to change body shapes on cars. I found it very difficult to do that with TIG welding. The heat that I would present to the panel would oftentimes warp it, and then you're teaching yourself to shrink and stretch, and probably as a learning tool, that's a great way to do it. And I used to get into different debates about that. I think there's a time for each style of welding. I think if you're doing it yourself at home, buy a MIG welder, learn to use it. They're a very simple creature. They have 2 dials normally, and you can do some amazing work with them. So as far as pushing everybody into learning a new form of welding, I'm the guy that sits on the other side of the fence there. I think you can make your MIG skills so good that you won't warp a panel. You'll create a panel that holds itself together well. Arguably, the weld is always a little harder, so
Yeah.
that's what everybody talks about. But no, I think if you're going to be at home, buy a good 110
Yeah.
welder. Don't buy one without gas. Don't use flux core. I mean, there's some simple rules there.
Yeah.
And we could go over that. I mean, that's a half-hour lesson all
Oh
in
yeah,
itself,
absolutely,
right?
yeah. Well, that's cool, man. It's good perspective, and one of the things I like so much about this industry is that there's more than one right way to do stuff.
Yes.
And I lean on my MIG skills for light gauge sheet metal as well as heavy duty
too.
stuff because that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yes,
and
me
for
too.
me, it creates an easier path to reach my goals in metalworking.
Yes.
But when we stop learning, we're underground, right?
Yep. That's right.
So I'm always looking forward to open my mind. Tim Strange told me once. He said he's working with the guy. We're working with the guy. You never know who we're going to run into at SEMA. And I just got kicked in the can by Nate Chase. So anyway, we'll talk about Nate in a while. He's a great custom painter. But okay, there's an edit. Thanks, buddy.
I've never been here.
That's
Can you
what
help
we.
me to find Eastwood?
That's what we get on the floor of the Eastwood Company. Where was I? What was I talking about?
Oh, we were talking about something that Tim said about welding.
Oh, what Tim
I'm
said?
thinking.
Okay, that reminds me. What Tim said, he's working with the guy and talking about, fabricating this custom opening gas door, and he said it very well. He said, yeah, we're working with Jacob. We got to get him to open his mind a little bit more. And that really resonated with me. What is your thought on that, on thinking out of the box and changing things? Are you as fearless as you have always been, or does that grow?
Oh, I think it grows because as your skill set evolves, and as your taste evolves, I think when you get to the point of the industry where you start to realize, in a show of 5,000 cars, there's a lot that have a bunch of bling bolted on and a lot of Gucci shit hung on them.
Yep.
And then there's some cars with some substance. Well, there's very few with the substance.
Yeah.
So you'll look at 2% of the cars have substance, and I think that's just like fine wine.
Yeah.
It doesn't come overnight. The skill set doesn't come overnight. It isn't that common. It requires some luck and some imagination. And I think like anything that is above and beyond in any industry, it has to be acquired and it has to be earned.
Yeah. So it's a process, and for guys that are dyed in the wool like you and me, it's a fun process. Sometimes it's frustrating, but you got to do the work. You got to earn it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're satisfied with what you did 2 years ago, I think that's the point where you should maybe get out and take up golf.
Yeah. Very good. I'm glad you're so pointed with these opinions, man, because it matters. You can nice your way out of conversation, but you mean what you say, so it's awesome. It's good.
Yeah, and I know that there's some guys following up behind us that are going to build some really cool stuff.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to see what that's going to be.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to take a part in examining that and maybe adding some of their great ideas to some of my future builds.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah. Have you got any sponsors or anybody that's worked with you over the years that you want to thank, you want to give a shout out to?
I've got a great paint sponsor that's been helping me this last little while. BASF has been helping us. This latest car, I had a really great relationship built up with a guy from Tremec, by the name of Nate, and he's been able to really help us with the last couple cars. We're trying to build cars that function, real show cars that function, and that's really a big battle.
Yeah.
People don't understand how come a guy will spend $2 million on a car and not drive it. I 100% understand it.
Yeah.
If you're going to go buy the Mona Lisa, you're not going to stick it on your outside deck and wait for it to get rained on.
Yeah.
So arguably, a lot of these guys, they have a reason for building these cars. They want to enjoy the sight of them. They want to enjoy the art of it. They help raise the bar in the industry.
Yeah.
So rather than criticize a guy who's not willing to drive his car, appreciate the fact that they're at a different part of the industry.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do different than that is we're trying to build cars at that caliber and then go road race them.
And that's a tall order, and you're pulling it off, man, so congrats.
Yeah, thanks. Cool.
Well, thanks for taking the time, JF, and it's a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll do some more stuff down the road.
Have to do it again.
With this next car, which we can't tell you about, gets released and debuted, we'll talk about this stuff again. What do you think?
We have to, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. You're
Thanks
listening
so
to
much.
Shop Talk. JF Launier from JF Customs in Osuyas, BC, Canada. I got to give my Canadian brethren a shout out. Thanks. You're listening to Shop Talk, brought to you by the Eastwood Company. Do the job right with Eastwood. Thanks for listening to Shop Talk, and as always, feel free to drop us a line on the Shop Talk email address and let us know what you'd like us to bring you here. And keep on listening, because there's more from SEMA 2013 in future episodes. For now, I'm your host, Kevin Tetz, and we are brought to you by Eastwood. do the job right. In the meantime, check out everything at the Eastwood.com website. Eastwood has what it takes to do the job right. And you know me, I like to do the job right. Thanks for listening to Shop Talk. I'm Kevin Tetz. Thanks for listening to Shop Talk. There is much more to come. I'm your host, Kevin Tetz. We are from the floor of SEMA. Remember, do the job right with Eastwood.